questions. You're going to seminary. Are you getting the answers that you desire?
Not in seminary. And I also, eventually I'd become an elder of a church in the area that was, growing very rapidly, similar to a church experience you shared before the podcast started, and was an elder for quite a few years, almost 10 years, before they asked me to come on staff and to be essentially I could write my own job description as the pastor. I would call myself the pastor of spiritual formation. And my job was to help the people in this rapidly growing church. It was a church too that had a lot of really, really young Christians that, like me, when I was 19 years old in college, when I read the Bible at home, there was a lot of those kinds of people who didn't grow up in a church and just had come and heard the teaching and the things we're doing and said, I'm in, but I don't know anything, And so a lot of what I did in my job is how do we help those people start growing and get along in the path of discipleship into growing into and being more and more like Jesus, experiencing the depth of his love and feeling this kind of discipleship character stuff. At the same time, I'm having the struggle, like, do I really know how this works? But as a job as a pastor of discipleship, I just kind of dived in and started doing a bunch of stuff. So I wrote a book for brand new Christians. It's called Basic Training for Walking with Jesus. And we gave out over 20,000 copies of that book and had lots of really, really good results from it. People saying, wow, I understood it for the first time and everything. I started a training on spiritual disciplines for 5 weeks. And again, the results of that, one person said, I think this training actually saved my marriage. And another person came up and said, I had no idea we even did this kind of stuff in the church. And so I saw really good results, really encouraging results sometimes. But if I was honest, there's other times where it seems these books and trainings and other things I didn't seem to work at all for some people, or didn't work for some problems. They worked really well for certain kinds of issues and problems in life and didn't work at all for other kinds of problems, and seemed to work for some people and didn't work for other people. So even though I saw lots of good results, I also saw some confusing results. And I still, I would find myself in my office scratching my head, looking at my dry erase board and thinking, I'm not even sure I know how to do my job anymore. Or at least, I was honest enough to admit that there were big variables about how people grow in their character and Christ likeness. There's a lot of variables there I must be missing because this is not working the way I thought it would. And it was about that stage where I, through a fortunate providential, I would say, encounters with different people, I came to know Jim Wilder. And it was through a meeting with a pastor of another church, or an elder of another church, who came and visited our church, who was a friend of Dallas Willard and saw some of the stuff I was doing and got together with me and said, I see what you're doing, all this stuff that Dallas Willard writes about. And he even kind of sometimes would complain to me that, people are talking and reading books about discipleship, but I don't see very many churches actually doing it. And this person, his name's Bob, he said, Michael, I see you're actually doing it. But that was in the middle of this kind of struggle, like, I'm not sure if it's working. So I said, yeah, Bob, and I kind of vomited my frustrations and my questions on him. How do people grow? Why does it seem to work sometimes and not other times? Why do we sometimes see Christians who treat people better than some non-Christians who treat some people better than Christians I know? Why do we sometimes see Christian, even leaders and pastors and ministry heads that act in ways that don't look like Jesus at all? And how do I help my people grow? How do I grow? And I just kind of like dumped all these on him. And we started meeting and just kind of looking into this discipleship question. And he's the one who said, Michael, I think it might help us too, to take a look at how God designed the human brain and how to change character.
Bob said this, or
yeah, Bob said that.
Okay.
And I kind of ignored him. He's, Bob was kind of old, he's in his 80s. And I thought maybe he had a senior moment because what he said made no sense to me at all.
Okay.
But thankfully he was persistent, because a month later, we were meeting once a month for lunch and doing this. And I pulled a couple other friends in and stuff. But a month later, he said, I still think we're ignoring the neuroscience angle of discipleship. And I said, Bob, I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean the neuroscience angle? And he got this kind of wry smile. And he said, well, why don't I invite my friend Jim Wilder to our lunch next month? I think he can probably explain it better than I can.
Mm.
So a month later, we sat down with Bob and me and another pastor friend, and then Jim Wilder. And Jim turned to me and he said, so Michael, what would you like out of this time together? And I said, I kind of vomited my questions on him, my frustration as a pastor, and saying, and I said, I don't think I really understand how people change, or I don't know how to do my job.
Mm.
And then Jim said something that I've never forgotten. He said, Michael, I think it will help you a little bit to understand how God designed the human brain, right? Because we agree that God designed the human brain, how he designed the human brain to grow our character and to mature us as citizens of this new family we call the kingdom of heaven. And then Jim reached down into his briefcase and pulled out a plastic brain. He unhinged the brain for the two
he
halves.
just was carrying around a plastic brain.
He just happened to be carrying around. Maybe he does that all the time. I have no idea.
Okay.
And he starts saying, basically, Michael, every way we can sense our environment, from taste and touch and hearing and all the senses, in any ways we can sense our surroundings and relational surroundings, they end up going into the back right side of our brain stem, on the right half of our brain. And there's a control processor that processes these, and it sends all this data and all the sensors in our bodies and everything. And it goes from the back of our brain on the right side to the front of the brain on the right side. And then behind our right eye, it crosses over and then goes from the front into the back on the left side of the brain. And it is analyzing our experiences. And it's this control process that is in charge of the experience of growing our character and maturing us. And then he explained some things about that. And I said, well, what's an example then of some spiritual disciplines or practices or things we do that help us grow and mature, but that maybe we wouldn't know in the typical Christian answers of how we grow as disciples. And he said, well, Michael, the brain was really designed to desire first and foremost, and looking and scanning even 6 times a second for one thing more than any other thing at the beginning. And that thing we call joy. Mm. And even the scientist and researcher, his name's Dr. Alan Shore from UCLA, is a researcher and psychiatrist. And he actually found, kind of interpreted this control processor, and he called joy the twinkle in our eye that non-verbally, without words, doesn't need words at least, that communicates to me that I can tell from the twinkle in your eye that I'm special to you and that you're happy to be with me. And he said the brain uses joy almost like, a car needs fuel. It fuels any kind of growth in discipleship that we may want to do. Meaning our environments, our churches, our surroundings need to be high joy. High joy, again, is that I'm glad to be with you. It doesn't mean I'm happy. It means I'm happy to be with you. So we can be joyful during a success or a good time of life, the birth of your child or your wedding, and we're happy, or we're entering into your joy. But we can also be very highly joyful with you in deep loss. We think of the horrible loss we've experienced in the last week or two in Buffalo and now down in Texas. We don't recommend people be happy about that, but we do recommend they be joyful, meaning we are with you. Those churches and people down there coming around them saying, we will walk with you. But this is a joy that's very, very somber, but it's very joyful, meaning I am with you in this. You are not alone. I will walk with you because you're special to me, and I would never leave you alone in this. And I'll do anything, including sitting in silence with you or giving you space or helping you out, but I'm with you. My brain is scanning. Our brains are scanning the environment, even right now, are scanning our environment, looking for faces that are happy to be with us.